You ready? Okay. Welcome to the North Reading School Committee meeting. We've just exited an executive session, and we will continue the meeting in public session here. Our first order of business is public input. Is there anybody out there in the public wishing to be heard on any issues? Okay, seeing no one. Our next order of business is our student report, and we have new student representatives who have been elected in the past few weeks, and the two representatives are Matt Layton, who is a member of the class 2014, who I've coached in soccer, and Jackie Lanzaro, who's here tonight, and she's from the class of 2015, and she's going to provide the student report. Jackie?
For sports, football beat Hamilton Wenham 47-27 at home last Friday. Also last Friday at home, boys soccer beat Mystic Valley Charter School in their first states game. Sadly, in their second game this Sunday, they lost 1-0 against Rockport. Also, girls volleyball lost in their first states game this Saturday at Weston. Cross country had Cals last weekend. Last Thursday, the cheerleaders placed third at Cals in Masco and are sadly not moving on. Also last week, the Student Council-sponsored food drive exceeded their goal of 5,500 items to end the food drive. A lot went on for the community last weekend. Along with the sports games, on both last Friday and last Saturday, the Maskers Club presented their comedy, Lettuce and Lovage. On Saturday morning, the groundbreaking ceremony was held for both middle and high school. On Sunday morning, 6 students competed in the high school quiz show. They are waiting for their results, but if they place in the top 16 schools out of the 90 in Massachusetts, they will move on to the next round, which is televised. For the weeks coming up, there is a lot going on. First, Student Council is hosting a talent show this Thursday at 7 p.m. On Friday, there will be a Veterans Day assembly for all high school students who wish to attend during Power Block. Also on Friday, football has a game at home versus Ipswich. It is also their senior night. Next Thursday, Fall Sports Awards will be held in the high school gym. Also next Friday, a few students and coaches will be attending MIA-sponsored Sportsmanship Summit at Gillette Stadium. Sometime prior to the Thanksgiving game, Rotary is sponsoring a luncheon at Colonial for both the football and cheerleading captains. On Friday the 16th, Student Council and class officers are sponsoring a poster-making party after school to prepare for the pep rally on the 21st. Spirit Week will be held from the 19th to the 21st. On Monday, students will wear pink to show support against breast cancer, and they will have the option to donate money to this cause during lunch. On Tuesday, they will wear their class colors, and on Friday, they will show their North Reading pride by wearing green and gold.
There's not much going on.
No. So is this everything you expected it to be and more?
She has student work.
Student work? Okay, great.
So, a few weeks ago in Mr. Emerton's U.S. History 2 honors class, we had to complete a storyboard after learning about immigration. Our storyboard had to depict the journey of an immigrant in the 18 and 1900s. My storyboard is about a man named Justin from Italy. He was a farmer who moved to the United States to escape being drafted in the war. He arrived in Ellis Island and soon moved to New York City. In square number 3, I showed how the political machines helped him. In square number 4, I showed what life was like in a tenement. And in square number 5, I showed what life was like at the cloth factory. In the last square, I showed what he missed from home and what he wants for the future. He missed his family and his old house, and he wants food, money, and eventually to own a factory. We were graded by our writing, our neatness, and our effort.
I can tell you it's very neat.
Well, you must have done your research because Mr. Venezia being of Italian descent and my mother being Italian.
I think that's my grandfather.
So we need to look at that closely to make sure you get all the right steps in there, right? That our grandparents had to follow to get over here. That's great.
That's about the time they came, Tom.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Nicely done.
So we get some, you don't want to look ahead, but football team, I know they have to win one more game, but the Thanksgiving game could be huge.
No matter what happens against
Right.
Ipswich, the Thanksgiving game will determine whether or not they go to the postseason.
So we
For
need
the first time in 32 years.
we need everybody to get to. Is
Yeah.
that long? 32 years?
1980, I think, was the last time. I'm pretty sure.
So we need everybody to get to Linfield. I know it's Thanksgiving, but
Huge game.
you know we need everybody to get out there. And then the quiz show, I think that's the WGBH Public Television quiz show. So that's pretty stiff competition. You got to come in top 16 out of 90
Have
schools.
you ever watched that?
Yeah, the kids
The
are
questions are unbelievable.
I know.
And those kids, I don't know where they get those kids from. I think they bring them in.
other places
Other
because
places.
or they.
Probably other
Jackie, were
countries.
you there?
Bring 'em in from
Yeah, I
places like
competed.
that.
Oh, you're on the team.
Yeah.
Are you on the team?
Yeah.
What's your specialty?
Science and math.
Really?
Yes.
Well done.
And what was your feel?
How were the questions? Were they?
Well, a lot of the questions were based on like ancient history, which I learned in 7th grade, so I didn't remember.
I
any of
lived it, so
So do you have
Saving
any?
a
Do you have any sense of how you guys did, or?
I know that we scored in the low 700s, and the most points you could get was 1,300.
Yeah.
But I don't know how other schools are going to do.
So you just scored. You weren't competing against anybody. You
No,
were just trying to see.
we
how
were in a
much.
room by ourselves.
Oh, okay. So each school comes in, they give them the test, or they ask them the questions
Yes.
individually.
Did you
Okay.
sneak in any notes or anything?
No.
Well, good luck. Hopefully you'll make it through. I think it's great that we're participating though, and this is something that the school can do every year.
Yeah.
Those
It's-
questions are
yeah.
out of sight
Yeah.
sometimes.
Jackie, when will we find out?
Next Tuesday, we'll
Okay.
find out.
And then I was at the soccer game last night. The
Tough
boys
game.
played great. Yeah, Rockport's a really good team year in and year out because Rockport doesn't have a football team. So
So they got a lot of
all the
athletes
best
playing soccer.
athletes in Rockport in the fall
Play
play
soccer.
soccer. And not that our athletes aren't good, but they have a choice between football and soccer. So every year Rockport's one of the top teams in Division III. And it was a great game. There was tons of people there from North Reading, and it was freezing. But they scored with about 20 minutes left, and they won 1-0. So, okay. Any other questions for Jackie? No? All right. Thanks for coming.
First
And
day
as-
here, don't
Right.
pretend like you have to stay.
Right. Don't pretend you're interested, and don't pretend you have to stay.
Get
You
out
can.
the door.
We always tell the students, you can sneak out. We know you have homework, so it's up to you. If you
But
want
of
to
course,
stay,
if
you
you-
can stay.
If you leave, it will affect your grades.
No.
If you stay, you'll be the first one.
Yeah.
The two have stayed, that's for sure.
Don't listen to their teasing. Do not listen to them.
Great job.
Thank you,
Thank
Jackie.
you
Yeah,
so
nice
much.
job. Excellent. Okay. Do you want to move?
To Ms. O'Connell.
Oh, okay. So we have a couple of guests here tonight. We have Ms. O'Connell, principal of the middle school, and we're going to ask her to come up to present the annual North Reading Middle School Grade 8 Washington, D.C. trip. Hi, Kathy.
Hello, good evening. So I'm here just to request your permission to take as many eighth graders who would like to attend our annual trip to Washington, D.C. Last year was my first year taking a group from North Reading, and we had a wonderful time. I did blog some of the highlights of our trip back home, and with the exception of a few stomach bug issues, we had a fantastic time and were complimented at nearly every museum and exhibit we went to on the behavior and the interest of our students. So I was very proud to take North Reading Middle School there. And I would like to take them again the week of June 10th through June 14th, with your permission. And I believe you have a packet with both the DC trip itinerary as well as a draft itinerary for the students who may stay home, which we make every effort to make that trip as comparable as possible. Luckily, living in New England and near Boston, we are able to take the students on day trips that are comparable to the Washington, D.C. experience. The trip this year for Washington, D.C. would be $757 per student, and the day trip estimate would be $175 per student. Not
It's pretty similar to last year's itinerary.
The itinerary is pretty much exactly the same.
They go to the museum last year, is that new?
Yeah, we did not go to the museum last year. It was on the itinerary, but due to the stomach illnesses on the bus, we chose to head back up.
Because that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think the kids would really like that.
They missed it the year prior too because of an event on their end.
Oh,
We
right.
weren't able to go. So, fingers crossed, it's on the itinerary for day 5.
And how does this cost compare to last year? Do you remember?
Last year it was $740, so it's a
about
little.
the same.
It's a little bit more, and I can only equate that right now to fuel.
Yeah.
I'm thinking could possibly be the increase. And last year, with the gracious help of our PTO, we were able to offer as many scholarships as were needed. We offered many partial scholarships to offset. We asked parents who asked for assistance to try to come up with 1/3 of the fee, and we paid 1/3 with the PTO's help, and the company paid 1/3, which was great. So everyone was able to go who chose to go.
The company being the...
The Capital Tours
Oh, that's
company.
nice. So that's excellent. Do you have a number of how many students didn't attend last year?
As an estimate, I believe we took about 160 students, and there were 210 students, I think, last year. So certainly more than half attended, if not maybe 75% attended.
The remaining students partake in the daily activities?
Mostly, yes, they partake in the daily activities. A few chose to stay on campus, and we offered academic offerings.
Any other questions? Comments?
I know when Mr. Hodges last year here, he had said that he wasn't aware of a single student that wasn't able to go because of the cost. That if students weren't going, it was for some other reason, basically, so.
Yeah, I think we've had that discussion here, and that we'll never really know that for sure, because there may be some students who can't go because of cost, but they're not going to. We're not going to hear that
Yeah, he
from
was-
the families.
Really,
Right.
strong about that.
I think it's a great trip. Both my kids went on it. I think they got a lot out of it. They got to see a lot of things that they had never seen before.
I mean, there's no place you can go on a bus better than Washington DC for, a educational experience. I don't think there's anywhere you could go.
No, and the itinerary is, it's really solid. We hit most of the key spots
Yep.
down in Washington. So I'm in favor of it again this year. I always do have the issue of the cost, but I know that the community's been generous in the past in supporting students and providing funds. And I know that, I think there's a lot of repeat scholarship businesses that repeat every year in terms of providing scholarships.
And there are families who are very, very generous with paying, in addition to for their child, they will also often sponsor for another child.
Yeah.
That's
We're
great.
very lucky to live in a community as generous.
Plus they get to eat dinner at the Golden Corral.
Right. I mean,
That may have been where the stomach bugs came from.
Could be.
Want liability
if
for
the
that.
Golden Corral wasn't on there, I might have a different feeling. If the Golden Corral wasn't on here, I might have a different feeling about it. But any other questions or comments? At this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the 8th grade trip to Washington DC.
Second it.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Next, we have, I was going to try to use Patrick's title, but I don't.
The Director of Academic Services.
We have the Director of Academic Services here to give us a report on MCAS scores. Patrick? Looks like we gotta move, Cliff. You gonna take it? Movie on your face.
You know what, I wouldn't doubt I'd be okay with that.
Cannot wait.
I'm so
Take
psyched.
tickets ahead of time.
Yeah, it's gonna be crowded, unless it's bad weather.
Thanks, Patrick.
I think they're gaining momentum as they go.
They're getting better.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to send it?
Oh, yes.
Definitely getting better. You
because they hadn't been doing that.
Midfield's going for a lot, too. It's gonna be a good
It's
game.
going to be tough.
I know. She said we're talking in class.
What?
I pulled for you, Jack. This is your first time, right? She said,
All confused. All right.
So I understand that the superintendent did bring you through an overview presentation at a previous meeting where you looked at some of our advanced and proficient scores at different grade levels across the state. And that was an exercise that she also led with our administrative council, which was a great introduction for us into our scores for this year. The purpose of this presentation tonight is to look at what we're doing big picture. Now, I have up here 2011-12 because we're looking at the scores from last year, but this is really about what we're doing this year with last year's scores. And I have MCAS analysis because that's the majority of what we're going to talk about, but this is also part of a bigger picture of data driven decision making and data analysis, and that was what I discussed last time I was here. One leg of our triangle was really this data collection piece and analysis piece. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, to start off, on October 5th, across the district, we had our first professional development day, and we spent a lot of the time that day going into the education data warehouse, and I'll explain in a moment what that is. But we spent a lot of time at the building-based level with our curriculum leaders and our administrators at every building, leading the teachers through a very detailed exploration of this resource from the state and a common protocol for discussing our data. So I'm going to explain more about that in just a moment. Our building leadership has been following protocols at every building. We've worked really hard as a team through our data training last year to develop common language and common protocols. There was analysis always going on at every building in many different ways, but what we've worked very hard on is coordinating our efforts so that we have a common understanding of what this means for data across the district. We've also asked our leadership this year, our curriculum leaders, 25 curriculum leaders, to do a close analysis of specific content areas looking at the spring 2011 exams. I've also been working in cooperation with the superintendent on a 5-year analysis of our scores. And our plan is to put all of this information which is coming in into a shared report that includes school and district goals and next steps. So the idea here is to coordinate our efforts for data in the district. So first on the data warehouse, a few things that we've been looking at. This is a great resource that's been around for several years, but the joke was you used to run a report in the afternoon and come back the next morning and it would be up, and that's really not an exaggeration. The state did put a lot of effort into improving this. This is now the 3rd version of the warehouse, and they're continuously improving this, actually making something called Edwin. So this is the EDW. They're making something called Edwin, which is connecting all of the data from MCAS, but also all of the submissions that we do, and so that we can house and analyze a lot of data in this place. So this is continuously improving. So we started this year looking at the new data warehouse. There's lots of trainings and webinars that the state offers. I attended quite a few of those. They're offered every couple of weeks, and I would share back with the administrative council some of the things that we'll learn there. And one of our early ACs, one of our principals, Glenn McKay, who's very good with the data analysis, this is a strength of his. He led a small group focus with our administrative council, and that was a great opportunity for us to be more familiar with this tool at the administrative level and the new changes to it. We then had 4 sessions on 2 days in September 26th and 27th, where the 25 curriculum leaders, most of whom were trained with our data-driven protocols last spring, learned basically what the protocol would be and the assignments would be for the October 5th training. And so we had 2 main goals. Again, this was an overview, but the 2 main goals were, number 1, to make sure everyone in the district, all the educators in the district, understood the advantages to looking at live data. So in the past, what we would do is we could run these reports as administrators, and we'd print them out on a piece of paper and we'd hand them out. And people would immediately jump into that micro level. They look for their students, their classes, and they start seeing how they did. What we talked about a lot in this was really the advantages to looking at data at the micro level and then slowly focusing on macro. That's the most important, where the rubber meets the road with our teachers and students, but it is important to look at some big picture trends and analysis as well. So we really went through that protocol. But with the live data, some of the advantages, as you can see here, you can look at the district, the school, and the student level. This shows you a few of the reports you can run to look at growth and achievement. You can look at curriculum, but you can also sort on the fly by standard. So if you want to see which questions address which standard, if you want to sort and see which questions of a different type, whether it's multiple choice, short answer, open response, long composition, you can very easily click on most of the questions and see the actual test question as well, which the state has provided. And so it's all in one place. It's a great way to quickly organize and to make a lot of decisions, and it's really something that we need to use more frequently. So what we've done with Carl's help is we, in the past, the administrators had access to this warehouse. We've rolled it out this year with our curriculum leaders as well, and we also have some grade level folks represented at grades 3, 4, and 5 at the elementary. So no matter what, when you're in your team looking at student data, there's at least one trained leader there who's able to access the data warehouse. So the other goal, in addition to looking at live data, was to develop a common protocol. So we used the training from a data-driven decision-making course last year, and we followed through a step-by-step process of looking at data, coming up with some questions, going visual with a graph or a response, and really following that process. And it was really a way for those that were trained last year to share with all the educators what their protocol is. And the feedback, I was able to get to every building on that day, and also through the feedback we collected in the survey. People were very happy about this. They liked this common language, they liked this tool, and the teachers were very happy to know that at least someone in their building, their principal and also a curriculum leader, was able to run this program whenever needed, when they need to look at some student data. So we thought that was very helpful. The other thing that we've been working on this year, for several years in this district, we've had what's called the MCAS Unified Response, and this was a detailed plan for what the district does when MCAS comes out, what the analysis looks like at all different levels, including, for example, one of the things that's in there is you'll look at the areas of strength. We have a cutoff of scores of 80% or higher, and then we say 80% or lower as an area of improvement. So this process has been in place for many years in the district, and it's happened in different ways at different buildings and different levels. But what we've really worked on here as a full district is to coordinate and document and report on this process. So to that end, we created a form here. So this is just the first page of an online form that all the curriculum leaders are filling out. When they create these forms, the other questions after we get into here, we'll get at which of those standards and questions were 80% or better scored, which were 80% or lower, so our areas of improvement. And then some analysis questions. What are some things we can do right now? What are some long-term curriculum goals? So it facilitates the conversation, the dialogue at the school level. This all then gets reported back into a spreadsheet that we're unable to share from school to school and across the district with what that analysis looked like. So for the focus this year, the teachers concentrated on the 2011 standards, and I'll explain that more in a moment. But they looked at the current test questions and mapped them to the 2011 standards, which was part of the new Common Core. So this is what the educators did, and next year, as they've been said, this is what they'll jump right into at the beginning of the year. We won't have the big overview of Data Warehouse. They'll just jump right in and start using it, which people are excited about. So this is being conducted now at the school level, department meetings, things like that. Teachers are having this ongoing conversation in a coordinated way that they can document and report. So as we've looked at this primarily and preliminary, we have identified some areas of improvement. Now there are areas all across the board that we could look for improvement, but we do need to try and focus. So one area that we definitely saw as an area for improvement that we could focus, there may be other focuses at the school, grade, or teacher level, but district-wide, we're all going to focus on writing. And we've seen this is a place where we can gain substantial points. So we're looking at the open response and the short response scores in English Language Arts. We're looking at the writing prompt and composition scores in English Language Arts. We're also looking at our short answers and open response scores in mathematics. We've also noted that the rigorous questions, those questions where the state also scores the lowest, some of the hardest questions, we also score the lowest on. And that makes sense, but at the same time, that tells us a little bit about some of the skills that are needed that we need to develop. And this will again relate to the Common Core. Some of the deeper thinking, some of really getting to subtext of a passage, anything that's a little bit more challenging, something like poetry, things like that over time are some place that we need to focus and for some improvement. We also noticed that we should look at some of the interventions that are needed for our high needs subgroup. If you recall, that is our special education, low income, and English language learner group. So some examples of what this deep analysis looks like in writing. So this is our open response. We chose grade 7 English language arts over the last 5 years. You can see the average score on the open response questions in each year, 2.56. We've hovered around 2.48 for an average, somewhere around 2.5 for open response scores. Something that the superintendent pointed out to me is if you look at the number of blanks, which a student leaves blank or scores a 0, it's gone down over the years, and that's a very good trend to notice. That means that students know what to do. A lot of students, when they panic or they're afraid or they're not sure what to write, they don't write anything, and that's not good. So we really have coached our teachers, and we're going to continue to show this trend. We want to see the same trend in every area because we have to get students confident enough to write something, to put their ideas on paper, and to not freeze up at that test state. So that's a good trend.
What's
Yes,
this
sir.
score on a scale of? What are we scoring against?
I'm sorry, thank you. That score is out of 4 points.
Okay.
So when you look here at the bottom, what I did is I pulled out just for 2012 so you can see. The left-hand column is the number of the question, and yes or no just indicates whether the state happened to release the question, so that that's a resource for our teachers. Even when they don't release the question, there's still useful information provided. It'll tell you the strand. It might say it's a poetry question. It might say, it won't give you the actual question, but it gives you a lot of information around that. But that shows you that there. These are the average scores on the 4 open response questions. The topics, fiction and nonfiction. The 1 is your lowest score, then 2, then 3, then 4. So just like we want all our students scoring in advanced and proficient, we really want to see the majority of our students, and we want to see all of our students, getting 3s and 4s. And as you can see here, there's a lot of room for improvement, getting our students from 2 over to 3 and to 4. The way that we're going to do that, we're going to really look at what are called anchors and exemplars. So we're going to continue, when those scores are shared, those questions are shared, they also give us a sample of the kind of a response from a student, an example of what's getting a 3, what's getting a 4, what's getting a 2, what's getting a 1. And so part of the process that we're going to go through, not only with the educators, but also with the students, is what are those essential ingredients, what are those elements that will get you from a 2 to a 3 to a 4.
So you have the
Practice and
nonfiction,
Yes.
but you don't have copies, you don't get the questions from the state. But
Right.
Clearly, there is lower performance on the nonfiction than the fiction.
Mhm.
Do we have any idea as to why that might be?
It's definitely it's definitely about what's taught as well. And this is a trend everywhere. But our focus, part of what we talk about with the Common Core, is a real shift towards informational text and nonfiction.
Right.
That's an area of challenge. There's no questions from this year, but if we go back through all the years of MCAS, we will find some questions and prompts and examples for nonfiction that we'll be able to use as well. But that's absolutely a good point. This is a place where we need to focus, and we'll talk about what we're already doing and what we're going to continue to do with nonfiction in particular.
I just want to make a point. What he provided for you on the bottom is what has been done for each one of those years, looking at 5 years of trend analysis. So for 2011, you're looking at all of those open response questions, and you're doing that deep dive into, is it fiction, is it nonfiction, standard 12 or 13 in English language arts. And then if it's nonfiction, what are those questions, or what are they looking for within that question that challenges our students so that they're not scoring as high as they might on narrative text, which is easier to apply comprehension strategies to than expository text or nonfiction text.
Right. All right.
So it gives us so much information. So Patrick has really done a nice job teasing out the process that our curriculum leaders are going through, the process that he's going through with me, to really dig down into the data and find out exactly where are we doing well, and where do we need to improve, and how are we going to do that? So he's going to show you more examples
Well,
of
but
that.
this also maybe gives an indication as to why the Common Core is shifting to cover more nonfiction. And it seems to me that in terms of preparing students for college and beyond, that being better able to understand nonfiction, to call it nonfiction, and to write in that way and to answer questions in that way is important to, future skill sets in terms of getting jobs, et cetera.
Patrick's going to talk a little
Absolutely.
bit about that.
And nonfiction is a term that's not really, it's now informational.
Right, it's
informative
right.
text, right?
Really? I'm sorry.
It is nonfiction, under the old standards, nonfiction
Under
was
the
more of
core.
like a
The-
genre,
under the core.
poetry, drama,
Right.
nonfiction. Now it's been elevated to its own,
Subgenre.
Yeah.
it's right up there with narrative and expository, so. So now we're looking at writing prompts for grade 4. These again are scored, there's 2 scores for all of these. The conventions are scored on a 4-point scale, and the composition is scored on a 6-point scale. So you have 2 scores, and then you have the average. Now again, this is the average for all of the students. But you can see that our 5-year convention scores are around 6.7. That's our average out of 8. And over the past 5 years, our compositions exceeded the state average. They're at 6.9 out of 12. Our composition average is about 3.5 out of 6 points because it's half of that score. What I've put up here as well is our DART districts. I know that you've been looking at this a little bit and talked about this here. It shows us, again, where we are in comparison to districts that are most similar to us in terms of grade span, total enrollment, and special populations. This is comparing apples to apples, and it's a good tool and measurement for us to use. And it's something that I think at the educator level that we're really starting to look at. You always want to look at your neighbors around us, but sometimes it's really good to look at those districts that are most similar to us for comparison. It's good to see where we are. We're in a good place here, near the top in some of them. But I think more important it is to recognize that we are all these districts, along with all the districts in the state, are working together to reach the same goal of proficiency. So we can also use this information to say, okay, a district that's doing really well, what can we learn from that district? How can we come together and see what's working? What professional development have they had? What time have they spent? What are some resources and materials they're using? So groups that we have, like the North Shore Consortium for Staff Development, a lot of these districts are represented in that group, and we're coming together to bring in guest speakers. We had 20 teachers attend Larry Ainsworth, who's a national speaker for looking at standards. All came together, shared the cost of bringing in that speaker, and we had that professional development together. We're also working together with a group of districts in the SEAM Collaborative, working together to come up with sample questions and work and sharing writing prompts and scoring institutes and bringing in professional development there. So we're really pooling our resources together with some of these other districts that are out there. So I think that's important to note as well. So that's our writing prompt. I'm going to show you with our short answer and open response for mathematics. I did 3 years here. The test did change a little bit, and so these are the 3 most similar years where we've got the 4 open response questions in mathematics and the 6 short answer questions. What I've shown you in here is also the years, and then also, so that's the aggregate, all students, and then the high needs group next to it. The bold indicates a place where our scores are below the state average. So if we are struggling in a high needs group with a standard, we're comparing them now to all high needs groups across the state, and we're slightly below. So
Well, I'm confused. You say, there's nothing at the top, it says open response, but what are all those other categories where you have scores, but there's nothing in the left-hand
I'm sorry,
column?
the open response there represents all 4 of those there. I just wrote it in the margin.
Oh, okay, so, okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
So
All right.
those top 4 are open response, and the
Okay.
bottom 6 are short answer.
Okay.
Okay. So our scores here indicate definite areas of improvement. I didn't indicate it on this picture, but I can tell you that if you look across, there's in each of the years, some of the areas that are in bold is a geometry standard. So that's something that we are able to pick up on and go deeper with and say, and look at those actual questions and say, why is this a skill that, over the last 3 years we seem to be having trouble? Is it something with our curriculum? Is it something with the way we're presenting it? So that's an area that we can analyze a little bit further. It definitely gives us, with these types of questions, the shift in the question is that now the student not only has to write and explain their thinking, but they have to be able to answer the question correctly first. And so what that really shows is one of the skills of transfer. Students can demonstrate, if you teach them the Pythagorean theorem and they learn it and they practice it and then they take a test on Friday or the end of the week, they can do it. But if they're just given a problem and they need to go and recall, and this is when I'm supposed to apply the Pythagorean theorem, that's where there's some difficulty. So that tells us something, and we need to create more opportunities for students to practice those skills of transfer and using those theorems and those different ideas in mathematics at different times. So that's an area that we're continuing to work on.
And so is open response, again, they have to explain in writing, in words, how they came to their answer?
Yes.
Because historically, I think that is a problem for many students in any kind of school you go to.
Absolutely.
And personally, I don't understand personally the purpose of that, but I think if a student learns how to do math problems, be it geometry, algebra, calculus, I guess I'm confused as to why they have to. What's the purpose behind explaining your answer?
Well, I can tell you that when I learned that math, I learned through arithmetic and procedural math. And now arithmetic is no longer good enough. Mathematics is also being able to explain your thinking and your reasoning so that it's clear that you understand the concept behind the arithmetic. Do we know why we inverted and multiplied when we were dividing fractions? I learned the rule. Now, that's not good enough. You have to be able to explain why you invert and multiply. And then you have to apply that to a problem, a story problem, and show your answer in pictures, numbers, or words. So our students need to be able.
I understand what you're saying. I don't get it.
It's much more sophisticated mathematical thinking and reasoning than straight arithmetic.
And when you get a job as an engineer, you're going to have to explain how you got to the result.
Right.
So that someone later on, or not just as an engineer, as a scientist, you have to explain how you got there so someone else can come in and see how you did it and duplicate it.
We got a lot of good engineers today that didn't go through this, but that'll be the end of my speech on this.
Also prevents you from copying the kid beside you.
I guess, yeah. I guess, yeah, that's true.
And for some people, it's very natural, but for most people,
I think
it's
for
not.
most it's not.
That's right. And so this is stretching their ability to be able to understand the concept behind the math.
Okay. I'm not an educator, clearly.
It's even harder if you are good at math.
That's right.
Very often, you're not so
You're
good
not so
at
good
writing.
at that, exactly.
Those kind of things, so the brain seems to be
Right.
broken into two different groups. And to get them together is a little difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting to note that when you take a look at our aggregate, which is under the year, and then you compare it to the high needs, that's where we want to be narrowing our achievement gap. When we talk about North Reading, the achievement gap is taking a look at how do we help those students in the high needs group get closer to all the proficiency of all students. So under short answer, under 2010, you'll see the second short answer, the average was 0.94, and the high needs group the average was 0.9. So the achievement gap is negligible there. But as you can see, there are other questions, whether it's short answer or open response, where the achievement gap is much wider. So we need to narrow that achievement gap for our students.
These two groups, the high needs group and the, quote, regular students, are the same exact questions.
Correct.
And this is the state's expectation that the scores will end up being the same?
That the gap will be narrowed by
Okay.
16, 17, and Patrick's going to talk
So the
more
gap will be
about that.
narrowed, okay.
That's correct.
So again, as we see with the bold there, these are our areas of improvement. It speaks a lot to our areas in our interventions that are needed in our high need areas. So working with our special education teachers, also working with our Title I tutors, our after school MCAS tutoring, all the different interventions that we have throughout the district, and making sure that we're focusing. We have software in this district called Study Island that we use. Are we using that to its full potential? Are we making sure that the questions that we're putting into Study Island and giving to the students who most need them are giving them a steady diet of these kind of questions, and that they're practicing? Because this does take practice. It is a different way of thinking, and it is difficult for some to express themselves in writing about mathematics, and that's some area where we can definitely improve and practice. There are anchors and exemplars provided for these as well to show what a good response looks like, and for students to realize, here's what I wrote, how does that compare to what is the exemplary standard? So I drew up some connections to our NRPS 2016 strategy. We are working district-wide on common assessments. We've referred to this a few times here. So all students in 6th grade would have certain questions that all students take, so that then the educators can step back and see how are they doing towards these goals at points throughout the year. We're trying to focus that this year, and not only are we developing these common assessments, but we're going to even focus more to make sure there's a writing component on those assessments, so that we're looking at this not only when the MCAS data comes in, but we're looking at it throughout the year on these different types of writing assignments. We have our data team training. As I've mentioned before, we did this last year for all of our English language arts, mathematics specialists, special education leaders, as well as our administrators. We're going to continue that this year with science and social studies. We're going to have more follow-up trainings with that first group that went through, and we're going to focus on some new areas there to keep that momentum going. We're going to look at some focused professional development during the school day or during times for our teachers. Bless you. That's going to specifically focus on our writing in mathematics and ELA. We're going to look at, as I mentioned, our Title I program and other interventions. We have Title I programs currently at the Hood School, at the Little School, and at the Middle School during the school year. We also have a summer program that is for all students at the middle school and all 3 elementary schools. So this is a great opportunity for students who are identified as being at risk from their previous MCAS scores to participate in our summer programs and really look at this data and really focus the design of that program based upon the needs for those students that are coming in.
You have a question?
Question?
I did. Patrick, how are you integrating the parents' ability to assist them throughout the year and kind of like maybe starring certain homework assignments or tests that may be linked to MCAS preparation, or are we doing anything like that?
To indicate,
You know, like
what the
to indicate
questions-
in a test or in a homework assignments that this is part of, you know, the MCAS training. Do we do that at all? Or I know that we're preparing our kids throughout the year,
Yeah.
but I think at the end of the year, it's like, bang, you're taking the test. Where, you know, you're going through school and you're learning all this material for SATs, and then you're actually going out and practicing the SAT, you're learning how to take the test and all that. I'm not sure we're there just yet within the school system. I don't know if you
Something
can
we can
address that
continue
at
to
all.
communicate, and as we move towards standards-based, that open communication of here's what the lesson is, here's the standards, and showing that's something we're doing with our common assessments as well, really looking at, okay, we're asking this question, how does that relate back to a standard? And then when that's open and communicated to parents, to everyone, I think that would help. So you can see then that connection. So I agree that's an area we can continue to improve. The Massachusetts Tiered System of Support is something we're looking at systemically. We've heard the term RTI. This is something we're looking at. This is a system that incorporates some of the elements of RTI that really help us have a systemic approach towards our interventions. It involves Title I, it involves many other pieces. This is something we're looking at in NRPS 2016 right now at the administrative level, but we're starting to figure out how we're going to bring this to all in our district. I'm going to also mention the school improvement goals and the gap halving targets, which we talked about previously here. These gap halving targets are the goals for every single school. It's going to measure the MCAS, the CPI composite scores for every school, for every area. So we need to see those improvements met. That's a target set already from 2011 to 2017. So our school improvement plans, are going to specifically say, we want to see the students meet these goals. And again, one of the best ways to meet those gap-having goals, we've identified if we can really focus on writing and get those 2s to go to 3s and 4s, we'll see that filter up and we'll see those improvement in those scores. That's our prediction and that's our reason for this focus. So connections to the Common Core, I've mentioned a little bit before. A lot of the language in the Common Core at the very beginning, when you talk about what this is all about and why they exist, it talks about increasing rigor, increasing skills like perseverance, and as I mentioned before, the transfer of skills. So questions that are harder that challenge students to dig a little bit deeper, some different types of skills. It's really not only in the kinds of questions, but in the way we teach, the way we present, the kinds of assignments and assessments that we give our students, giving them opportunities to continuously demonstrate these skills. As we possibly transition to other forms, MCAS and other assessments in the future, the specific questions they'll be asked to do in these standardized tests will also reflect these skills. So that's something we're all working on there. We're also talking about our transitions to the 2011 standards. So all of the data that I presented tonight was on the old standards. The MCAS tests were on the old 2000, 2004 standards. One of the nice features of that live data, what they did is they mapped them to the 2011 standards for the elementary and middle school. So they're able to see, okay, if this were a standard that's going to be assessed in the future, what would it look like? So they're already starting to look ahead and say, oh, nonfiction, that now is recategorized as informational, and where does that look like? So that was something nice we were able to do with the live data there. For mathematics and for ELA, we're able to look at the list of accessible standards for each year. So this year with our MCAS, they're being assessed not only on they're being assessed on the standards that are common to both the old standards and the new standards. And that the list of those standards that are accessible this year has been shared with all our teachers. So they're aware of what is coming in the future. But some changes already with ELA and literacy. We've seen a lot of focus on narrative questions in the past, but this year it could be narrative, expository, opinion for 4th and 7th grade. We're not going to quite see that change at the sophomore test, the 10th grade test, until next year. We're going to see that change because the students that they have in front of them haven't yet been raised on this diet of the Common Core. But we are going to see some changes as soon as this year. So our teachers are already looking at their common assessments, looking at their practices, making sure students are practicing all 3 of those. And we're already doing this in many different ways, but it's just a focus and a reminder that this is what's coming. We've increased our content area reading and writing in science and social studies. This has been a focus for the last 2 years. We're giving writing and reading passages in the content areas. We also have a new science frameworks on the horizon, expected in the fall of 2013. Much of what I hear about that's going to include, not only it's going to embed this writing right into it, but it's also going to have a lot of inquiry-based, project-based learning, which is what we've been exploring and already have in place with NOADM and through the project-based learning programs we've been implementing at the middle school this year. So that's what's coming next with that. In social studies and science, they've been using document-based questions called DBQs for writing research, a lot about primary and secondary sources. So you can see that the new Common Core standards, as I've mentioned in the past, it's not just about English language arts teachers, it's about all of our subjects increasing the literacy across the board. So the role of the social studies and science teachers to increase that informational reading charts, interpreting rigorous passages written with lots of vocabulary in a subject area, it's going to help our ELA scores as well.
Well, the DBQs are interesting because those are used in some of the AP courses,
Absolutely.
like AP US History and AP Government, and those are extremely valuable in terms of learning how to read, interpret, reason, and create an opinion on what you read. And I know the students that have taken those AP courses have gotten a tremendous amount out of those courses because of those the style of writing that's required, the DBQ.
Absolutely, and it's been great. Jason McIntosh and Catherine Jones, our curriculum leaders in social studies, have done a great job bringing that to all of our teachers and all of our classes, because that is a great example of what this Common Core level of rigorous reading and writing looks like.
Mel, can you imagine 4th grade opinion? What do you think the opinion of the 4th grade boys are when they're answering a question?
With the writing
It'd
about.
be hilarious.
Yeah.
And so finally, our next steps. Again, we're going to focus on writing. We're going to look at this common assessment data. We're trying to keep it manageable this year so that we can go back to our protocols, our going visual, looking at data, looking at those common assessments that we've created this year. Our teachers we're learning, we're practicing, we're creating assessments, we're giving them, and we're getting that feedback, and we're learning how to use that data to improve instruction immediately and long term. So that's a practice we're going throughout the district, and we're going to be spending a lot of time on this year. We'll also have some focused professional development opportunities. We're going to bring in some folks for the middle school teachers to really learn about teaching mathematics, teaching writing through mathematics in different ways, and also with our writing at all the levels. Continue to look at the Common Core at all of our levels, understanding it there and preparing for those expectations, because it's here this year, as I mentioned, and coming more in next year as it's a full expectation for Common Core next year. And our data team training, as I mentioned, follow up with our group that was trained last year and continue that training with science and social studies leaders this year as well, and also our K-12 leaders, because believe it or not, looking at data is also going to apply to art and music and physical education. We've had great conversations already about what that could look like, because it's going to be part of our expectation that we can establish a standard and how we're going to measure that standard in every subject across the district. So it's been a lot of work done there, and a lot more still to go. Any questions?
So it sounds like what I'm hearing here, and I'm not exactly sure how closely tied it was in the past, but the complaint you often hear about MCAS is we're teaching to the test and we're not teaching our students things that will really help them in the future because we're teaching to the test. It sounds like what I'm hearing here is the test is going to be tightly tied to the Common Core curriculum. So if we're teaching to the test, then we'll be teaching what we should be teaching our students. And it sounds like, I'm not sure, but in the past, I'm not so sure it was as closely tied to the curriculum, and it seems like they're hopefully going to do a better job of that. My one concern here is when I talked about the 21st century education, is the creativity aspect, and I don't know if I see that coming through in the Common Core or in the MCAS. I think it's going to be great for science and math, which is extremely important, writing, etc., ELA, but there's that creativity aspect that I think is missing. And that's something that I hope doesn't, suffer, because we have to spend way too much time on all of this.
So you have to be careful to, one, make sure the Common Core doesn't end up by being just a stovepipe that
Right.
anchors everybody
Right,
into
the be-all, end-all, right, exactly.
one thought process.
Right.
So all we have is one kind of person.
One kind of person, right.
And
But
That's
if I
my-
could just comment on that, the creativity piece of this, creativity is, I think, means different things to different people. What I hear it is being problem solving, taking a concept and applying it, knowing to apply it to something. And you could select different processes or get to an answer with different strategies. That's creativity, and I think on some level that's
Right.
creativity, it's problem solving. And it's a really key skill, but making those connections and transferring those skills and applying them and knowing to apply them, it's hugely helpful to know that that's something that we struggle with on different levels and different grades. Which to me is it's skills, not necessarily the Common Core or the content. It's that across the board, that will serve the interest of all of our students as they learn new stuff and then have to apply it to different situations. So to me, that's the creative aspect. It's not
Yeah.
the narrative.
We're not teaching
piece.
kids how to problem solve, we're teaching them how to problem solve one way.
No, I don't think that's the case.
I think so.
I mean, I think you can, the Pythagorean theorem, yes, there's one way to solve that problem because it works. And it's what we teach in the Common Core, but, could we arrive at different solutions to those types of problems? Yeah, but smart people solve these problems one way and it works well.
And I agree. When I talk creative, I'm talking more creative arts and those kinds of things.
I know what
I'm
you're
hoping that
saying,
doesn't get,
yeah.
I think you're right. I think, having kids find different ways to solve problems is a good idea.
It's one aspect of creativity, but you are right. The other part is coming up with ideas and saying, well, that's a really, how did you figure that out?
Right.
And reacting to something and coming up with something new.
Yeah.
Tests don't do that. This just allows us to identify skill deficits in particular areas. It doesn't address that vision piece.
I guess I'd be interested in how does this all play into say the SATs or the ACTs, how are they changing to adapt to what we're doing in terms of a new Common Core curriculum that's being, adopted nationwide?
There are many changes coming to those tests as well as to the AP exams. Different kinds of questions that are forcing you to go deeper, to be creative in the way Karen was speaking, where you're not just choosing one thing and defending it. You have to choose something and also choose why you didn't choose the other. Which is that's a skill to be able to talk about both and to bring your voice and your personality into why you chose one over the other, as opposed to just fact. So those things are changing as well to keep up. And I agree, it's very important to keep, this is very important. MCAS is one piece of data. Our Common Assessment is another piece of data. And when I talk about something like art, that is difficult. And one of the things that we're working on is, it's not going to squelch the creativity, but it's going to give us a vehicle to discuss what is proficiency in art. What does it mean to have achieved something that met the standard? Because there are standards, and it does make sense. That's why we have art critiques. That's why some pieces go to museums, and so it's important for students to learn those skills. And as a former English teacher, I always said I never saw MCAS as getting in the way of teaching creative writing, because I would always say the best way for any student to understand figure of speech or something in it is to write it. If you write an idiom, if you write a creative story and you own it and you can write it yourself, there's no better way to identify it somewhere else. And if you can do that in reading and in writing and everything. So I think it's, again, the art of teaching. We can still work in those creative aspects. The science of teaching is really the focus here on these aspects here. But I think the inquiry-based science, plenty of creativity in there. And that's something we're really focusing on, is to change the way we approach it so that creativity and all those skills are embodied in the day-to-day instruction.
Any other questions, comments?
That was one of the comments I was going to make. I was going to make 2 points, the art and science. So I'm glad to hear Patrick talk about that, because I think the teacher brings the creativity to the instruction and the way that students demonstrate their understanding of the science of teaching, which are the standards. The other point is, when MCAS was first introduced, it is a criterion reference test against the curriculum frameworks. But because we, as a profession, weren't used to having those standards as the underpinnings for what we taught, we felt that it was an encroachment upon our creativity, whereas it just brought coherence to the process. But now that we're used to that, we're envisioning this Common Core as that next sophisticated step toward a more rigorous and relevant curriculum. So it is a process. But I think that now that we're well versed in what standards mean and what they do for us, I think we're more willing to accept the Common Core as getting us to that next level.
I did have one other question.
Yep.
I just wondered if we had done any comparisons of student cohorts over time. I know we slice things, typically of this year the students scored this, but as they move through and take the MCAS, have we done any analysis to know whether or not they're actually improving on these skills over time? Is that something you would consider doing if you're not doing it?
We do. We do have the growth model that does look at student growth against scores. The test is not really set up to do that, to measure it over time. That does happen, and people will tend to look at that at different times to see how a certain cohort is doing through time. At the individual level, you will look at students' skills related to a standard, and you might say a student, their writing performance, have they increased? Is their writing through portfolios, is that increasing, things like that. And you might be able to look at students, if a student's struggling with geometry, and we do some interventions, what that looks like. It's challenging, though, because the test is not really set up to follow a cohort, because the tests from grade 4 to 5 to 6 aren't really aligned that way. So it's not really reliable to look
There's
at.
no rate of reliability from one grade level to the next. The tests are separate, so they're not meant to be compared over time through the grade levels.
It's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah,
I agree. We've said that many
Talked about
times.
that many times.
We agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Nice job.
Okay. Okay. This time we'll return back to the agenda, and under continued business, we have an MSBA SSBC update. Kathy?
Yes. The last secondary school building committee meeting took place on Tuesday, October 30th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And at that meeting, our OPM, Jeff Wetton, provided a detailed overview of the scopes that are associated with the early bid packages. And those early bid packages include site work, concrete, and structural steel. So he talked a lot about what's taken place up to this point, and Mr. Bowers is going to be playing a key role in reviewing the bids or being part of that whole bid process. Mr. Bowers, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything about what your role is going to be.
It's just an evaluation of the file sub-bid contractors. We're going to pre-qualify them. And there's a number of those. Actually, the expectation is there will be something like 70 packages to review. I'll be one member of the review to look at that. Actually, the only one from the SSBC. They were kind. They didn't end up by insisting that multiple people.
I know. Cliff was nominated by numerous members of the SSBC that night for this role. He gladly accepted.
So the design
Accepted.
documents.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Pardon me. Go ahead, Cliff.
Torture.
The design documents are 60% complete and will be submitted to the MSBA tomorrow. And the last Thursday's pre-construction meeting was devoted entirely to the estimators from PMA, Doran Whittier, and Gilbane, working together to reconcile the estimates that they currently have for the project and making recommendations for future value engineering strategies. Something else that was very important that took place at the last SSBC meeting was a vote on 3 proprietary status items that had been recommended by a supervisor of building and grounds, Wayne Hardacre. So there was lots of discussion about each one of these items, and the SSBC voted separately to award proprietary status to Automated Logic for HVAC monitoring and management systems, specific security equipment such as motion sensors, cameras, key fobs, etc. And the last one was the Primus key system that we use currently for high security doors, both interior and exterior. And the reason why Wayne brought these forward was these are systems that are currently in place in our schools and will provide a high level of consistency between all of our schools when installing these in the new middle school, high school project. So it will allow for greater standardization across schools, and it's something that Wayne will be able to do remotely. So we felt it was very important that we had these proprietary items added as part of the project. I don't know if Jerry or Cliff want to add anything else. You were both there about the proprietary.
I think Wayne was very adamant, and he's very comfortable dealing with this particular products and this particular company too, so.
I think he was pleased.
Very pleased.
In the case of the motion sensors, cameras, and key fobs and so forth, those are a specific brand of the hardware that we use so that it'll all be consistent and interchangeable. And the Primus key system, again, you're going to pay for a high security system of some sort. You're not going to pay a lot more one way or the other, or maybe not as much with a specific one, but that allows then uniformity across all of the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the HVAC monitoring and management system, there's going to be a careful monitoring of that to make sure that we're being protected against somebody trying to make a little extra money on us. And there's going to be some action by both the architect, Gilbane, and our owner's project manager to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire on price.
Thank you. A technology meeting took place on Friday, October 26th, between consultants working with our architect, Doran Whittier, and and with Patrick Daly, the two building principals, and I attended. And the discussion focused on network technology, classroom technology, the television studio technology labs, the library media center, office technology, and digital signage displays. It was just the first of many meetings to come on technology. As you can imagine, it's a very important resource that we are discussing and trying to plan for 3 years out. And as you know how quickly technology changes, we're developing some of the concepts, but when it comes to the actual purchase, that will take place at the point of implementation into the project.
One question on that, would it make sense, I don't know if it's too soon, to involve Rob Carboni from NORCAM in these meetings moving forward at some point, if we're talking about the television studio? And because I know one of the things that we've talked about is hopefully having television cameras, robotic cameras installed in several areas of the school.
Yes.
So I think we'd want to tie in with that.
That's a very good point. Right now, we're talking about budget.
Okay.
So,
Once you start talking about kind of planning,
Yes.
layout, then it would probably make sense to get him
yes,
involved.
but I will make note of
Okay.
that.
Thanks.
Those were the cameras,
Okay,
remote.
right.
Thank you. On Tuesday, October 30th, from 8 to 10 p.m., Doran Whittier presented the building project to the Community Planning Commission, and that presentation included an overview of the entire project. It included the schedule, the site layout, vehicle and bus circulation, parking, the wastewater treatment plant, phasing, grading, storm drainage, and traffic. The CPC engaged in a long and important dialogue with the presenters, and at the end of the evening, they provided conditional approval of the project. That was very good, and then a vote will be taken at their next meeting. So it was a long meeting. It was an involved meeting, but at the end of the day, I think the members of the CPC had a very thorough understanding of the elements of the project. I did attend.
So we have CPC approval, we have Conservation Commission approval.
We haven't had the
No,
Concom
but
meeting yet.
and then the third group is. the-
ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Right. Does the CPC come first?
Well, we went to the ZBA first, and they said you need to go before the CPC, Concom, and then go back to ZBA. So those meetings have all been planned out.
And the ZBA is mainly because it's higher than allowed in that.
There's a couple of things that the ZBA has to do, but I think they want to go to the planning commission first, so
Right.
the planning commission can kind of give us some direction in those areas. And then the ZBA would have to grant, I think, a variance for some of the
Height,
height,
right.
particularly on
That's
the,
correct.
on the high school wing.
Right.
And I think there might be a couple of other relatively minor things the ZBA has to deal with.
And obviously, we know with the Concom, there's I guess they have to deal with the wetlands.
that was the wetlands
Issue to
issue.
make sure we're dealing with that properly with the new project, correct?
And one of the other issues is that we have a school building and a residential district.
Okay.
I mean, we already have a
Right.
school in the residential district,
Right.
but that is one of the criteria in the zoning bylaws.
So that's a ZBA issue also.
Requires a
Okay.
ZBA.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. And as you know, the groundbreaking ceremony took place on Saturday, November 3rd. It was very well attended. We had a very nice program that included speakers. Mr. Webster was the anchor speaker out of 7. He managed to tie it all together.
Eight. I was 8th.
You were 8th.
I was 8th out of 8.
If he was any lower, he would have been out of the batting
I
order
know.
completely.
If they didn't have a designated hitter, I would have been out if it was beyond 9.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Very good. But you did a nice job pulling it all together. Many people have remarked to me that, you made reference to the 21st century learning skills, and we're going to have a building that will really serve us well now and well into the future. I don't know if there were any other comments by anyone that attended, but it was wonderful.
It's a
I had a
great time.
smile on the whole time.
Yeah, it was good to see it. It's
The
like a
cor-
milestone as far
chorus
as getting
was
this
great.
thing
It was. The
off
chorus,
ground.
the middle school chorus sang under the direction of Mrs. Carla Lister. And we had 12 students who actually held the shovels and wore the hard hats and broke ground.
I thought that was a great idea to have the
I
students
thought
do
it would
that.
have been a better idea to have one from each grade. But-
Yeah.
We had representation.
We had a representative from each school, right?
Yeah, we did from each
Yes,
school.
we
yeah.
did.
There's also a video of the actual
On patch,
throwing
right.
of the,
Well,
on patch.
I'll be honest
Right,
with
it's
you,
on the
they
patch,
didn't,
right.
they didn't dig very much.
No.
They just did a little bit.
I was upset. I was hoping they'd get the foundation moving.
Yeah.
There was a a liability if they did more.
I think they're a little chilly.
We had 12 kids. We could have gotten a lot more digging done than that, wouldn't you think?
Well, that would be union busting.
Oh, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
we'd have heard about
Thank you,
that.
Mr. Nelson.
Then we would have been in trouble. But it was great. I thought it was a great event.
That was
and
very,
we-
very well done, by the way. You
Thank
did a
you.
great job on that. We
It
had,
was freezing.
You know, past members
Oh, yeah,
of the school
Doc-
committee,
right.
Dr. Troughton was there. It was very,
Keith
very well
Manville
done.
was there.
Yes.
Keith
Keith
was
Yes,
there. Yes,
he did.
Keith was there.
He did.
Yes.
And former selectmen and
Yeah.
former
Oh, yeah.
school committee members.
Mr.
and-
Jervey,
Yep,
Ms.
Steve
Vaca.
Jervey and Maureen Vaca were there. And
That was very well organized, very, right on time. Everything
Right.
went off perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next regularly scheduled secondary school building committee meeting will take place on Tuesday, November 13th, beginning at 5:30 p.m., and the meeting will take place in the high school modular cafeteria.
any questions, comments? On time, on budget. We'll say that. We should say that every week.
We'll
right?
say that until it isn't.
Till it isn't. Right. Okay. Okay. Next, Little School Retention Wall update. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. Brought with me the specifications for the
Wow.
little school wall.
The wall. Unbelievable.
You know, if you wonder why these things can take so long, you'll understand that.
I think
We
that
live
might
in
be a little.
Massachusetts, so that's why we understand.
Can we use that as a text in the new informational reading
Can you
requirement?
imagine if we
for-
were fixing the Great Wall of China?
Oh,
kind
no.
of, what kind of
That's
a
that looks like that's a little shorter than Ulysses.
And these pages are
And they're full.
single-spaced, you know, it's almost 1,000 pages, so.
Unbelievable.
But I think I brought it in as to let you understand how slow this process sometimes can be, because there are so many Ts to cross and Is to dot as you work through the process. The most recent information was that the representative from Wright Pierce Company, who was the engineering company, met with the director of DPW last week and the building inspector. Because what's happening at this stage is there's a intentional desire to have input from all parties across town government. We want to make sure that this process works smoothly, that all interested parties have an opportunity to inject their input. So that is the process that's underway now. We're focusing right now on the latter stages of the development of these specifications before it goes out to the public for bid. Specifically, one of the challenging issues here is the access road that circumnavigates the little school. The access road, as it bypasses the new wing at the little school, is actually supported by the retaining wall. So as the retaining wall gets rebuilt, we have to have 24/7 access to that, what I would call that access road for egress for public safety. Should public safety ever need to surround the building, police and or fire, they have to have an access road. So there are, that I'm just giving you one example of the many challenges that we call this a little big project. Little not standing for the little school, by the way. It's a little project, but has a lot of implications.
Unless it doesn't turn the little big one.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that's happening. So the police and fire will be involved, as well as the building inspector at the last stage. It appears now that construction will take place after the new year. It does not appear that it can happen this fall, given all of the logistical concerns that they're working through. There will be a lot of reuse of materials, a lot of the
There
present
will be. Good.
stones and
Yeah.
bricks that are used
Good,
presently will be reused. They'll be stashed somewhere as they work underneath the infrastructure of the wall to provide enhanced drainage and armatures for bracing. So there's going to be a staging area as well. There'll be trucks on site. So the next thing that's happening this week are meetings with the principal, because this project, of course, it's impossible for this project to take place outside the school day.
Right.
Because that would be after 3 o'clock every day. So this project has to take place during the school day, so there will be noise concerns and heavy equipment there. So we have to be, extraordinarily careful to make sure that it can happen in a safe way. So Mrs. Molly is working now with us to determine where the staging area is going to be and develop a schedule so that recess can take place. The students have to walk down the stairs of the present retaining wall to get to recess. So those are some of the details. I'm just giving you a flavor for some of the details that are underway now. So that's we're still on track and confident that this will take place long before the softball season opens, and a little at a time it's happening.
Now, do you have any idea how long the actual construction time is? Not when it's going to start or finish, but how long it's going to take with good weather or
They're saying about 60 days max.
Really?
Yeah.
60 days.
It's a 60-day
Max,
project?
max.
And they'll be able to start this during the winter
They
months?
can, yeah.
They
If
can.
They will, what will happen is they'll go out to bid and contractors will come in. The hope is that they can get started before
Snow.
Ground freezes. And if they do their preliminary work, there's no reason why. It's possible that this work can take place throughout the winter, by the way. You know that my answers are always very, very cautious. I mean, if 2 winters ago we had 20 inches of
Impossible.
snow on the ground all
Right.
year. Last year, the ground never really deeply froze.
No.
So it's possible that this work can take place throughout the winter period, but until we meet with a contractor and lay out the schedule, we don't have the specific answers.
So, should we, given there's confidence that we'll get this done, should there be a plan in place in case it's not done for where the softball team is going to, and this is not up to you, Carl, but I'm thinking of talking with the athletic director and seeing if we ought to put an alternate plan in place in case the wall is not complete.
I think what they should at least take a look at, and I have confidence that it'll get done, but I think they should take a look at an alternative practice location.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, there are a lot of seasons when they don't get out until a couple of weeks after outside, until a couple of weeks after the spring season starts anyway. So the first game generally isn't until April 5th, or 6th, or 7th. So I think they could practice it. A lot of times they'll practice in the gym, or they
Right.
can practice on campus someplace, if they had to.
I have confidence it'll get done too, but
Yeah.
just in case if we have a really bad winter and they can't get in there till,
Right.
late March or something, we're not going to get it done. So I'm thinking there should be some kind of thinking or planning as to what we would do.
I'm sure they're already thinking about that.
Yeah, I would also submit, though, that I don't even want to seriously consider that it's not going to be done. So I want to be careful about how I phrase this. But let's remember, this past year, the wall was condemned, and we still had a full season. We
Right.
still had all 3 fields available for practice and for games. So should the absolute worst outcome take place, I'm not necessarily sure that the fields would be off limits,
Okay.
because they weren't this year.
All right. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Carl. Okay, next, athletic field sponsorship banners. Jerry?
I'm going to move to pass over.
Okay.
There was a discussion at the athletic subcommittee meeting, and it was nothing real significant, but I think anything to do with the banners needs to be brought to the school committee. So pretty much they were looking to just take and spread the banners out a little bit more so there's some space in between each one of them. And in order to do that, they would have had to spread them out on the fence, on the same plane as where they are now. But the black fence that comes in from each side, they wanted to spread it out a little bit more. But after Marty Tilton is determined that it's not going to be necessary, he's going to be able to give it a little bit more space in between them and leave them right where they are.
I tell you that I don't think I would favor moving them out into the fence anyway.
Well,
So,
again, it's not a debate I want to go through now.
Right.
I think I don't think it would have been a big, a big.
I think we have enough,
wasted
it's just
all that
creep.
effort
It's
preparing.
called creep.
Well.
So anyway, but we won't discuss it.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessary.
I'm not gonna
to
get.
evaluate.
Right,
So anyway, it's off the.
off the table.
Yeah.
So,
No, I spent all this effort preparing for this
Moment.
moment.
And now it's off the table.
Now it's off the table.
okay, all right.
That's why we didn't tell you in advance.
Okay, next, new business. We did the middle school trip to Washington and MCAS analysis. We have school trip, North Reading High School Student Council. Kathy?
Yes. The Student Council requests a return to the annual Massachusetts Association of School Councils, their state conference, also known as MASC, not to be confused with the Mass Association
I
of
was
School
going back and forth
Committees.
between
Right.
the two.
Yeah, Mask
I
and
always
mask.
get confused by this. But it is held in Hyannis annually, and the dates are pretty much the same every year, March 6th to the 8th. It's a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. It's held annually to provide students both motivational and educational experiences, and there are trainings that take place on the topics of leadership. Students network with other students from across the state of Massachusetts, and there are opportunities for them to demonstrate their leadership by leading some of the workshops that their peers attend. And some of our students in the past have led those workshops at this state conference. So they have lots of opportunity to gain these leadership experiences. So I provided some information to you from the faculty advisor. Her name is Amy St. Arnaud. She was not able to be here tonight, but we wanted to move this forward so you had an opportunity to take a look at it. They provided information about how they will travel, which is in a 14-passenger van. And there will be chaperones. The cost of the trip will be about $350, and she listed out for you what's included in that cost. And there is information that was provided in the packet about the conference center. Their conference is actually taking place at the same location where Karen and I will be Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for the actual Massachusetts Association of School Committees Conference. So both MASC conferences take place. And you can see in one of the pages it lists what the general outline of the conference of events includes. And finally, Ms. St. Arnaud included the article from last year that followed the North Reading Student Council participation in this spring conference and some of the activities that were addressed by their participation. There's representation from all of the school student councils from across the state, and it's a wonderful opportunity for these leaders to meet each other, because chances are they will meet each other again in post-high school experiences. Any questions about this conference?
Nope.
I'm just pleased that they came to us so early.
Yes.
This time.
Yes.
That was
Appreciated
intentional.
that they was heeded very early, and I like
Yes.
that.
I think it's a good opportunity for the students. It's a good leadership opportunity, and I know last year our representatives that went down there were heavily involved, and I know Julie Bash was, I think she was president of
She
the
was.
Northeast region for the school committees, not school committees, student councils. So I strongly support this.
I do too, and all these trips stress they're on their best behavior.
Yes.
For sure, on all of these trips.
Yes. And it's volunteer, so I know that's a pretty hefty cost for a couple of days on the Cape, but this is volunteer and it's not a required activity, so I don't
That's
have a problem
correct.
with that.
And students do make up all of the work that is missed, because I want to make sure that you know that these are school days, but
Right.
these are some of our top students, and they excel at what they do.
Jeez.
Move to approve the high school student council trip to Hyannis, March 6th to 8th.
Motion by Mr. Bowers, seconded by Ms. Arquette. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
This was very
Next.
confusing.
Mask.
Mask.
Next
and
we have
pass.
the
All in one.
mask.
You think it's hard for you, I'll bet for the conference center, it's really hard.
Conference agenda review. Kathy?
Yes, what has been included in your packet is an overview of all of the workshop sessions that will be offered over the 3.5 days that Karen and I will spend down at this conference, November 7th to the 10th. And I wanted you to have an opportunity to preview these, because if there are any workshops that you would like us to attend and report back to you about at a future school committee meeting, I wanted you to have that opportunity to tell us what that might be.
Just assume between the two of them they'd attend all of them.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
That's
There
what I
were
was hoping. So-
there were
I
actually
don't think you support cloning.
there were actually a couple on Friday. I noticed there was one on school committee self-evaluation on Friday at 9, and that's not yours, right?
No, I'm actually gonna go to that one.
So, and there, I thought that would be a good one. It includes school committee self-evaluation, reallocating resources, how successful teams think, etc. So I thought that that would be a good one. That's 9 to 10:15 on Friday, panel session 7.
Mhm.
But I figured that you and Karen would get together and strategize which made the most sense, and you know us, and other than that, I don't have any specific
I was just looking for the 8 o'clock in the morning ones.
Or anything earlier than 8 o'clock?
Anything earlier than that.
There, what isn't here, but one area where I'm gonna go is just effective governance focused on student achievement, which is one of the areas
That'd be
we
good.
have identified
Yeah.
previously for, improvement.
Right.
And then there, of course, the foundation budget,
Yep.
is really very important, so I'll be going to that one.
What about the
particular.
Finland one?
What we can learn from Finland is probably,
Is that on the-
not on the table.
is that in there?
I'm gonna shift that to Kathy.
Just, I mean, a global perspective of what.
Do they have is there a session on that? I didn't see that.
Yes,
They
they do.
Is
did
it the-
on Wednesday
Oh.
in the morning, there is a session on what we can learn from Finland.
I think that's actually, well, you know, they worship teachers in Finland, and teachers are like put on a pedestal, and they're,
Talks about what strategies we may apply here and.
Yes.
yeah.
There's a wonderful documentary called The Finland Phenomenon, and I have viewed it a couple of times through the National Superintendent's Roundtable that I belong to. And it is fascinating to learn what the strategies are that that country does apply to educators, and how the system, there's no standardized test system in all of Finland. So students do not submit to tests like MCAS. And their high schools are comprehensive high schools that also include vocational and pre-vocational courses. So they're blended into one institution as opposed to separating out the trades.
The way they did it when I was a kid.
Right.
Exactly.
Same here.
So if you ever have a chance to watch the Finland phenomenon, I would support that, and I
I
would
should,
even get it
I
for
should be
you.
going, because I noticed they have orientation for school committee chairs, and it's how to become a more effective chairman. I probably should have signed up for this.
Years ago. Don't worry about it.
There's also
It's
a
probably too
section
late
on,
now.
business managers and how to effectively interview a business
Oh, really?
manager. But it also talks about how to effectively integrate them into, I guess there's some superintendents who are gonna actually talk about their successful searches for business managers, so
Good.
that might be,
That might be
interesting.
relevant.
Yes.
Karen.
It might be.
Slightly relevant.
Slightly.
There's a lot of good sessions. There'll be a keynote on Wednesday that we'll be attending that has the commissioner, I think.
Mhm.
Great.
So we'll be well represented, and I know Mrs. Vaca is also sitting on a panel.
Is she really?
I don't know
Yes.
which one, and I don't know if she does either, but she was invited.
Well, and I
So
hope,
we will be going.
I hope both of you stay healthy through the entire
Oh,
conference
Yeah, we
this
haven't
time.
had very good luck.
No.
Alternating years. It's your
Right.
turn, Kathy.
I was so sick my first year there, so it's going to be much better this time.
How about that sharing and consolidating services too?
That's, yeah, that's a good one too, I saw that. Yeah, that'd be a good one.
What day is that on, Michael?
That's the last day, I think. Friday, November 9th.
Okay.
Or is it? Yeah.
I might even go to the new nutrition regulations section and then get thrown
Yell
out.
at them? I was gonna say, go and
So-
yell at them.
The elephant in the room dealing with difficult people.
Is that in there?
It's in there too.
No.
It's a 4-hour session.
It's close. It is.
Okay.
Okay, so I
Right.
just wanted, thank you for your
Thanks.
input.
Okay, next, bills and payroll done. Minutes, do we have any? I didn't see any.
None at
No
this
minutes?
time.
Bids and donations?
None at this time.
Subcommittee updates. We do have subcommittee updates. We have policy committee. Cliff, anything to report?
We continued our work, at our last meeting, we continued work on section G.
Okay.
We're not quite ready yet, but we're close.
Okay.
Making good progress there, and we had a number of other policies that we worked on, that, things that need updating.
Okay.
Changes in the MASC.
Right.
Guidance.
Right.
On policies, a few of those things need to be upgraded. We have another meeting on the 13th of November, and hopefully come to some resolution on some of those and start bringing them here.
Okay. And then athletic subcommittee, Jerry, Karen, anything?
The athletic director gave us a very thorough fall athletic season update, which Jackie did an excellent job on giving to us in her student
Yeah,
report.
she's
So
great.
I have to say much about that. I'd repeat again that the football team's playing Friday night against Ipswich, and then Thanksgiving at Linfield. And they're now 7-1 and have a real good chance for the playoffs and hopefully the Super Bowl, Division III Super Bowl. So it's kind of exciting. Kyle did a great job on doing the presentation on the little school wall. We talked about that as well. The banners, again, that's a mood issue right now. And we did talk a little bit about the athletic director's request. We've done this several times about adding some assistant varsity coaching positions.
Right.
I think for some of it, obviously, for the fall sports teams, and probably even for the winter sports teams, it'll be in next year's budget, so that's something we can keep in mind in our budget discussions. And for the spring sports teams, would have to find a little bit of money. It's probably about $3,500 to $4,000, about $3,500 per assistant coach. He was highlighting some of the teams that a lot of other towns would have an assistant coach and we don't. For instance, varsity softball, varsity baseball, boys lacrosse, and even the 2 soccer teams.
Well, I know
might warrant having a second coach.
I know, for example, with soccer, the JV plays the same time as varsity, and the freshman. So there's no assistant coach. There's one coach.
Same with softball
and there's
baseball.
like 22 or 23 kids on that sideline.
I mean, softball and baseball, it's really awkward. I mean, if the coach decides to go out and coach third base, there's nobody on the bench.
And most
which
other
is
teams,
crazy.
I noticed, do have assistants for
They
those
do.
teams.
So I'd like to at least certainly bring it up for the next budget season for the for next year, and even at some point maybe talk about the spring. Although again, it's probably another $7,000 to come up with a couple of coaches.
One question I would ask is if that could be money based on participation that we might be able to find in the revolving account.
Well, we knew that the fall participation was higher than probably at least 5 years. So if that trend continues, spring and/or the winter and/or spring season, yes.
When would we have to make a decision if we wanted to do that for, say, baseball and softball?
I think he was suggesting by December would probably be the good time to do it, December, January, so that he would have time to find coaches and.
So maybe if we had some information on the winter participation,
Yeah.
we might be able to look at that and say, maybe we can do it for
We'll have that.
softball
We'll
and
have
baseball
that
for the spring.
in about 3 weeks, right after Thanksgiving. We'll
Okay.
have that. So, and again, it does depend on the issue with user fees again. How many students aren't going to be able to afford the user fees as well? So.
Right. Okay.
But that was pretty much it.
Right. Questions? Okay, upcoming subcommittee meetings. I know I committed to tomorrow at 4 o'clock for evaluation subcommittee, but I may have to decommit from that. I will let you know tomorrow.
All right, so we'll just
So I
connect
might not be
over.
able to make 4 o'clock tomorrow, so I'll let you know. I thought I could, but.
Earlier information would be helpful.
We can just say no now and reschedule it till the week after if you want.
Okay, I'd rather do that.
Okay, then why don't we do that so that you don't have to, I know,
You look so guilty.
I actually had a business meeting come up, so I can't.
we'll
after I talk to you.
reschedule.
Okay.
We'll,
I just assumed it was some athletic event.
No, there are none. There are none tomorrow.
we'll do it via email.
Policy Subcommittee, November 13th. Finance Planning Team is November 16th. And Athletic Subcommittee is December 11th. Administrative report?
You've been provided with a copy of the Walker Report. That was the full report that was done by, I think it was Mr. Jim Early and Mr. Bob McCardle from Walker Associates. So that is for your reading pleasure. It's dense, but we will have an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have at a future meeting to be determined.
But it's not nearly as dense as the Little School Wall Report.
I know.
It's not even close.
This is true.
This would be good to read at halftime tonight. Of the,
That is
Yeah.
double-sided, though.
It's double-sided.
Thank you. We conserved.
Good job.
And any correspondence?
None at this time.
Okay. Our next meeting is Monday, November 19th at the Batchelder School.
That's correct.
7 o'clock, so we'll get our presentation and performances from the Batchelder students and staff.
That's correct.
Then we meet Monday, December 3rd, and then Monday, December 17th, we'll be at the high school for our meeting.
Yes.
And we'll go out for our annual Christmas gala.
That's correct.
I hope.
Yes, absolutely, positively.
That- Okay.
We didn't make it last year.
Anything else? Okay, accept a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Good night.